Welcome to our channel. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Imperial Hotel shimmered like frozen, expensive tears. Beneath them, the annual Christmas charity gala for the Children's Hope Foundation hummed with a familiar, polished energy. Richard Darlington moved through the crowd like a shark through warm, champagne-filled waters, smooth, purposeful, and utterly detached. His tuxedo was impeccably tailored, his smile a practiced curve of polite interest. He exchanged handshakes with board members, nodded at rival CEOs, and signed a check for an amount that was substantial but not painful. It was the dance of obligation, a transaction where his money purchased social capital and a temporary reprieve from corporate guilt. The cause was worthy, supporting disabled children, but for Richard it was another line item in his philanthropic portfolio. He stood near a towering ice sculpture of a reindeer, sipping mineral water, his gaze drifting over the sea of sequin gowns and black ties. He felt the familiar hollow echo that often accompanied these events. The conversations were about market fluctuations, art auctions, and tropical vacations. He was listening to a logistics magnate drone on about his private jet's recent refurbishment when a flash of color near the charity's display booth caught his eye. It wasn't the vibrant emerald green of her dress, though it was striking. It was her laugh, a warm, rich sound that seemed to cut through the sterile atmosphere like a crackling fireplace. She was bent slightly, her attention wholly captured by a young girl in a wheelchair who was showing her a brightly decorated Christmas cookie. The woman's profile was elegant, her dark skin glowing under the soft lights, her expression one of genuine, unhurried engagement. Something about the curve of her cheek, the intelligent warmth in her eyes, sent a faint, disorienting tremor through Richard's memory. He excused himself absently, his feet carrying him across the ballroom floor almost without his consent. As he drew closer, he heard her voice, calm and kind, asking the girl about the specific design of the cookie's icing. It was a voice that pulled at a thread buried deep in the past. The little girl was whisked away by a caregiver, and the woman in green straightened, turning slightly. Her eyes, a deep, thoughtful brown, met his. For a moment they simply looked at each other. The noise of the gala seemed to recede. Richard's meticulously ordered world tilted on its axis. Audrey? The name left his lips before he could think, a soft exhalation of disbelief. Audrey Brown? Her eyes widened, a flicker of surprise, then recognition dawning like a sunrise. A smile touched her lips, transforming her face from beautiful to utterly captivating. Richard? Richard Darlington? Goodness. Time collapsed. The ballroom vanished, replaced by the dusty playground of Oakwood Elementary. The scent of pine from the Christmas decorations mingled with a phantom smell of crayons and chalk. He saw her instantly, the quiet girl with the big, observant eyes and two long braids, always carrying a book. The boy he'd been rough-edged and protective, had found a kindred lonely spirit in her. He'd shielded her from the taunts of other kids, shared his fruit snacks, and she'd helped him sound out the difficult words in reading class. Then, in 4th grade, his family had moved across the city, and just like that, she was a memory tucked away in the attic of his mind. Richard, a man who commanded boardrooms without breaking a sweat, was uncharacteristically speechless. I can't believe it. You're here, she finished for him, her smile turning wry. And so are you. Though this, she gestured lightly to their opulent surroundings, is a bit more than the cafeteria lunchroom. He laughed, the sound genuine and unfamiliar to his own ears. A bit. You look incredible. It was an understatement. The girl had grown into a woman of serene poise and striking beauty. The emerald silk of her gown complemented her complexion perfectly, and a simple diamond pendant rested at her throat. But it was the quiet confidence in her bearing, the intelligent light in her gaze, that truly stunned him. Thank you, she said, her cheeks warming slightly. You clean up pretty well yourself. The tuxedo suits the whole mogul vibe I've been reading about. Don't believe everything you read, he said quickly, then gestured to the charity display behind her, where photos of smiling children were projected. Are you involved with the foundation? I consult for them pro bono, she said. I'm a surgeon. Pediatric orthopedics. Of course she was. The brilliant, kind girl who patiently explained things. It made perfect, awe-inspiring sense. A surgeon, he repeated, admiration flooding his voice. That's phenomenal, Audrey. But not surprising. You were always the smartest person in any room. And you were always the one making sure everyone played fair, she replied, her gaze softening. I heard you climb some pretty high mountains. Literally and figuratively. They stood there, smiling at each other, the decades melting away in the space of a heartbeat. The awkwardness of reunion was absent, replaced by an effortless, startling comfort. It was as if a part of his soul, long dormant, had just woken up and stretched. The cookie break incident, Richard found himself saying, the memory surfacing with crystalline clarity. Second grade. You shared your homemade snickerdoodle with me after I dropped mine in the sand. Audrey's laugh rang out again, that wonderful warming sound. You cried. Not about the cookie, but because your nanny had made it and you were scared she'd be mad. And you told me we could tell her a squirrel stole it. You were a terrible liar. Your nose scrunched up. It still does, she admitted, self-consciously touching the bridge of her nose. It's a professional hazard. Hard to maintain a stern surgical demeanor when your face betrays you. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne flutes. Richard instinctively took two, handing one to Audrey. Their fingers brushed and a simple electric current of awareness passed between them. Her eyes flickered to his, holding for a second too long. To second-grade conspiracies, he said, raising his glass. And to finding old friends in unexpected places, she clinked her flute gently against his. As they drank, Richard's carefully scheduled world, the one where he would have circulated for another 45 minutes before making a discreet exit, shattered completely. All he wanted was to stay in this bubble with her. The symphony of their shared past played a soft, haunting melody in the space between them, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, Richard Darlington, the millionaire who had everything, felt the thrilling, terrifying sensation of wanting something more. Something real. And it was standing right in front of him in an emerald gown, with a smile that felt like coming home. The bubble held. Richard guided them away from the main throng of the gala, finding a relatively quiet alcove near a railing that looked out over the city's glittering Christmas lights. The world outside was a tapestry of white and gold, a silent spectacle that paled in comparison to the woman sitting across from him on a velvet settee. So, a surgeon who consults for charities, Richard said, leaning forward, his champagne forgotten on a small marble table. That sounds like more than a full-time job. Audrey swirled the liquid in her glass, a thoughtful smile on her lips. It is. But it's the part that makes the other part make sense. The operating room can be a brutal, technical place. Here I remember the why. It keeps me human. She looked at him, her head tilting. And you? Is it all hostile takeovers and stock options? The Richard I knew preferred building elaborate forts to following rules. He chuckled, the memory vivid. The fort business had a limited growth model. But you're right. The rules, they're a different game now. He paused, finding himself wanting to strip away the public persona. I run the company my father built. It's a responsibility. But I've also started a foundation. It focuses on accessible playgrounds and adaptive sports programs for kids. Her eyes lit with genuine interest. Really? That's remarkable, Richard. It's something, he said modestly, unnerved by how much her approval meant. It started after I climbed Kilimanjaro a few years back. Met a team of athletes, some with disabilities, who were attempting the summit. It changed my perspective. He didn't add that it had been a stark, lonely trek that had highlighted the emptiness of his success. Until now, he hadn't found anyone he wanted to share that truth with. You always did have a stubborn streak, she said, her tone teasing. I remember you trying to conquer the monkey bars after you'd sprained your wrist. You refused to come down until you could cross them one-handed. And you stood below the whole time, ready to run for the teacher, but also shouting instructions on how to shift my weight, he recalled, warmth spreading through his chest. You were a terrible nurse but a good coach. They fell into easy conversation, a tennis match of shared memories. The time they built a diorama of the solar system and used all the glitter, much to their teacher's dismay. The way he defended her when a classmate made fun of her meticulous, perfect cursive. The secret handshake they'd invented that involved a complicated pinky link and a thumbs up. With each story, the layers of the present dissolved further. The billionaire and the surgeon faded, leaving just Richard and Audrey. But the present kept intruding in fascinating ways, painting over the childhood sketches with richer, more complex colors. He learned about her grueling residency, the sacrifices, the triumphs of a successful surgery. She spoke with passion about medical advancements, but also with profound humility about the families she served. He told her about the pressures of legacy, the loneliness of the corner office, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing a playground his foundation funded filled with laughing children. "It sounds like we both found ways to build forts," she said softly, holding his gaze. "Just out of different materials." The observation struck him as profoundly true. He had built his from steel, glass, and capital. Hers from grit, compassion, and bone. And both, he suspected, had been constructed in part to keep something, or someone, out. A comfortable silence settled between them, charged with a new kind of awareness. The laughter had softened, the reminiscing had given way to simply looking at each other, seeing not just the ghosts of the children they were, but the adults they had become. He noticed the faint, tired lines at the corners of her eyes, the marks of long nights and hard decisions, and found them beautiful. She studied the strength in his hands, once scabbed from playground falls, now capable of steering fortunes, and saw the same fundamental integrity. "I looked for you," he admitted, the words leaving him before he could vet them. "When we first moved, I made my mom call the old school. But your family had moved too. It was a dead end." Her breath caught slightly. "We moved for my father's job just a few months later. It was a difficult time. I looked for you too. For a while, every new school I'd scan the playground." She gave a small, self-deprecating shrug. "I guess part of me thought my knight in slightly muddy armor might just show up again." "I'm sorry I was late," he said, his voice low. "Better late than never," she whispered. The clock struck 11, its chime echoing through the ballroom, signaling the beginning of the event's end. The spell wavered. The real world, with its demands and complications, loomed. "I should probably find the foundation director before she leaves," Audrey said, not moving. "Right. Of course." Richard didn't move either. "I have an early meeting." "Well, I always have an early meeting." They stood simultaneously, the movement awkward, their previous ease now tinged with a thrilling tension. He was acutely aware of how close she was. The subtle scent of her perfume, vanilla and something clean like snow, wrapped around him. "Audrey, he faltered, a man used to commanding language suddenly at a loss. "This was the best part of my decade." A soft smile touched her lips. "Mine too." He pulled a simple titanium business card from his wallet. On the back he scribbled a number. "This is my private line. The one I actually answer." He handed it to her. Their fingers touched again, and this time the current was a live wire. He didn't let go immediately. "I would very much like to continue this conversation. Maybe somewhere with less tuxedos." She took the card, her fingers brushing his palm. She retrieved her own simple, elegant card from a small clutch. "My direct line at the hospital. Page me if it's urgent. Text me if it's not." He took it as if it were a precious artifact. "I'll text. It's not urgent. But it feels important." They shared one last, long look, a silent acknowledgement of the seismic shift that had occurred in a few short hours. The past had not just been revisited. It had come alive, tangled with a present full of startling possibility. Walking away from her felt physically unnatural. Richard made his obligatory goodbyes, his mind a world away. In his town car, gliding through the silent, festive streets, he stared at her card. Dr. Audrey Brown, MD, FS, the girl with the snickerdoodles. Across town, in her quiet apartment, Audrey placed his card on her kitchen counter. She traced the embossed letters of his name. The boy from the fort. She felt unmoored, a sensation both terrifying and exhilarating. Her life, a meticulously calibrated machine of duty and healing, had just been introduced to a variable she'd long ago written out of the equation. A variable with kind eyes and a smile that felt like a memory made real. Both lay awake that night, the glittering Gala now a distant dream, replaced by the vivid, unsettling echo of a connection reborn. The ghosts of Christmas past had arrived, hand in hand with a future they'd never dared to imagine. The text arrived as Audrey was finishing a 6-hour spinal fusion, her muscles singing with the familiar ache of focused tension. Walking through Carlton Park. They've strung lights in the old oak grove. It made me think of our glitter diaster solar system. Care to assess the damage? Or? A smile, small and private, touched her lips beneath her surgical mask. It was the third such message in as many days. No pressure. No grand declarations. Just gentle, persistent invitations into the spaces of his world, or rather, into the quiet spaces he seemed to be carving out just for them. A walk in the frost-dusted botanical gardens. Coffee at a tiny bookshop cafe. It was a courtship that respected the brutal rhythm of her pagers and on-call schedule. Something amusing, Dr. Brown? Her resident asked, carefully passing an instrument. Just a memory, Audrey murmured, her focus returning to the delicate field before her. But the warmth of the memory lingered, a glowing ember in the cool sterility of the ore. Later, showered and changed into civilian clothes, soft jeans and a cashmere sweater, she found herself driving toward Carlton Park. She told herself it was because she needed the air, because the tension of the day required a walk. But the truth, undeniable and thrilling, sat in the passenger seat beside her. She wanted to see him. He was there, a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette against the twilight, leaning on the iron fence overlooking the duck pond. He wore a charcoal wool coat, no tie, his hair slightly mussed by the wind. He looked less like the magazine cover billionaire and more like Richard. He turned as she approached, and his smile was immediate, unguarded, wiping the fatigue from his face. "You came," he said, as if genuinely surprised each time she did. "You promised glitter-level spectacle. I had to verify." Her breath misted in the air between them. They fell into step along the path, the city sounds muffled by the snow-dusted trees. Strings of white lights twinkled in the branches, creating a cathedral-like canopy. It was indeed magical. "How was the fortress today?" he asked, his shoulder gently brushing hers as they navigated a narrow part of the path. "Structurally sound. We reinforced the main parapet," she said, playing along. Then, shifting to the truth, "It was a good day. The procedure went perfectly. The little girl will have a much better quality of life." He stopped walking, turning to face her. The colored lights played in his eyes. "What you do, it's staggering, Audrey. Truly." The sincerity in his voice warmed her more than her coat. This was the heart of her struggle. Her career was a jealous god, demanding absolute devotion. Letting someone in, especially someone with a life as complex as Richard's, felt like a risk she couldn't afford. And yet, with him, the wall she'd spent years building felt porous. "It's just my job," she deflected softly. "It's your calling," he corrected. "There's a difference. I admire it. I want to understand it." That was the dangerous part. He didn't just want her time. He wanted to understand the core of her. They resumed walking, and he told her about a new playground design his foundation was reviewing, one with sensory elements for children with autism. He asked her opinion, listening intently to her medical insights. It was a collaboration of minds, a merging of their worlds that felt natural and profoundly satisfying. Over a simple dinner of pasta at a quiet Italian place he knew, the conversation flowed from medicine to music, from childhood fears to current hopes. The chemistry was no longer just a nostalgic spark, it was a steady, growing flame. When he walked her to her car, the space between them hummed with possibility. "I have a charity board dinner tomorrow night," he said, his voice hesitant. "It's stuffy. Obligatory. But I'd be less miserable if you were there. As my guest. No pressure." She hesitated. "A public event. A step out of their private bubble." "Richard, I'm on call." "I know. Bring your pager. Leave any time you need. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "I like being seen with you." The simple admission undid her. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay, I'll try." His smile was worth the leap. The following evening, Audrey stood before her closet, nerves fluttering. She chose a sophisticated, long-sleeved purple dress, elegant but understated. The venue was the opulent Metropolitan Club. As Richard had predicted, it was a sea of polished silver and murmured business talk. But with him by her side, his hand a reassuring presence at the small of her back, she felt anchored. He was introducing her to a silver-haired philanthropist when the air changed. A scent, heavy and floral, preceded a voice like polished honey. "Darling, there you are. I've been looking everywhere." A woman materialized beside Richard, looping a possessive arm through his. She was stunning in a way that seemed engineered, blonde hair in a perfect chignon, a dress of bloody crimson that clung to a figure straight from a magazine. Her eyes, a sharp cerulean blue, swept over Audrey in a nanosecond assessment that dismissed her as non-threatening. Richard stiffened. "Serena, I didn't know you were back in the city." "Surprise?" Serena purred, her smile not reaching her eyes. She turned the full force of her attention on Audrey. "And who is this new assistant?" Audrey felt the insult like a subtle slap. Richard's voice cooled. "This is Dr. Audrey Brown, a dear friend." "Audrey, this is Serena Thorne." "A doctor." "How noble," Serena said, the word sounding faintly like an affliction. Her gaze flicked to Richard, intimate and knowing. "You always did have a soft spot for fixer-uppers, didn't you, darling? Remember that disastrous stray dog you tried to rescue from the Hamptons?" The metaphor hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Audrey saw Richard's jaw tighten. Before he could respond, Serena leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper meant to carry. "Do excuse us, doctor. I simply must steal Richard for a moment. Old investors, you understand. Business he wouldn't bore you with." She pulled him gently but insistently into the crowd. Richard threw an apologetic, frustrated look over his shoulder. Audrey stood alone, the warmth of the evening leaching away. The words fixer-upper and stray echoed in her mind, intertwined with the proprietary ease with which Serena had taken him. She watched them across the room, Serena's hand on his arm, her laugh tinkling like broken glass. They looked like a picture from a society page. A perfect, glamorous match. The seed, small and poisonous, was planted. It whispered of different worlds, of past intimacies she knew nothing about, of a man whose life was a maze of obligations and people like Serena. The effortless trust she had begun to place in Richard, in the boy from her past, suddenly felt naive. Her pager buzzed against her hip, a stark, welcome reality check. Trauma alert. Level 1. ETA 10 minutes. She didn't seek Richard out. She simply left, the image of him with the stunning Serena etched behind her eyes. As she drove toward the hospital, toward the clear, definitive needs of her operating room, her heart felt the first faint crack of doubt. The fortress walls, momentarily lowered, began their silent, steady rise once more. The hospital was a sanctuary of stark, unambiguous need. For the next 36 hours, Audrey lost herself in it, in the rhythmic beep of monitors and the precise language of trauma protocols. A multi-vehicle collision on the interstate kept the ore lights burning and her mind blessedly focused. Yet, in the quiet moments, during a suture while waiting for lab results, Serena Thorne's honeyed voice and glacial smile intruded. "Fixer-upper. Stray." Richard called. He texted. "I'm so sorry about Serena. Can we talk?" The way she acted was unacceptable. "Audrey, please." Each message was a pebble against the growing wall of her doubt. She didn't have the emotional bandwidth to answer. Or, a quieter part of her admitted, she was afraid to. The controlled chaos of the ER was easier to face than the messy uncertainty he represented. On her second day off, exhaustion weighing her bones, the confrontation found her. She was at her favorite neighborhood coffee shop, in leggings and an old medical school hoodie, seeking caffeine and anonymity. She was scrolling through research journals on her tablet when the scent of expensive perfume announced the intrusion. Dr. Brown. What a coincidence. Audrey looked up. Serena stood by her table, immaculate in a cream-colored sheath dress and a fur-trimmed coat, holding a cup of tea as if it were a prop. She looked utterly out of place amidst the scuffed floors and indie folk music. "Miss Thorne," Audrey said, her voice carefully neutral. "May I?" Serena didn't wait for an answer, sliding into the chair opposite. She placed her cup down with a soft click. "I feel I owe you an apology. The other night I was abrupt. Seeing Richard with someone new was a shock. We have so much history, you see." "It's fine," Audrey said, closing her tablet. "You don't owe me anything." "But I do," Serena insisted, her blue eyes wide with fabricated sincerity. "Richard is a wonderful man, but he can be impulsive. especially when he's feeling nostalgic. He gets caught up in an idea, a charity, a business venture, a person. She leaned forward slightly. He's mentioned you, of course. His little childhood friend. Sweet, really. A charming diversion from the pressures of his real life. Each word was a needle expertly placed. Audrey remained silent, her face a mask of calm she'd perfected for delivering difficult news to families. The thing is, Serena continued, our worlds, his and mine, they're intertwined. Our families, our social obligations, the charities we chair. It's an ecosystem, really. And Richard, for all his success, needs that stability. He needs someone who understands the game. She gave Audrey a pitying smile. Your world is so noble, Doctor. But it's also so demanding. And frankly, so different. The gossip columns, the endless public events, the scrutiny, it would eat someone like you alive. I've seen it happen. It's not a kindness to let him drag you into it out of some sentimental whim. Audrey's coffee had gone cold. She felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. It wasn't just malice, it was a ruthless strategy dressed as concern. And the worst part was the sliver of truth it exposed. She had seen the flashbulbs at the charity dinner. She did feel like an alien in those rooms. I appreciate your insight, Audrey said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands beneath the table. But Richard and I are adults. We can navigate our own ecosystems. Serena's smile turned pitying. Of course you can. But ask yourself, is it fair? To him to be constantly pulled between two worlds? Or to you to have to constantly translate yours for him? She stood, smoothing her dress. He's hosting the Darlington Winter Gala next week. It's the social event of the season. I'll be there, of course. We're co-chairing. It's a tradition. She let that hang in the air, a reminder of a shared past and future from which Audrey was excluded. Think about it, Doctor. Sometimes the kindest thing is to bow out before the real damage is done. She left as suddenly as she arrived, a vision of gilded certainty. The seed of doubt, planted at the club, now sprouted thorny vines. Audrey stared out the coffee shop window, seeing not the street but a future of impossible choices. Her life-saving work versus the draining spectacle of his. Her quiet authenticity versus the performative glitter of his world. The boy she remembered versus the man entangled with Serena's. Across town, Richard was in a battle of his own. Serena had not been a coincidence at the coffee shop. He knew her tactics. Furious, he confronted her in the lobby of her designer building. Stay away from her, Serena. This is between you and me. There is no you and me, Richard, she said coolly, examining a perfect manicure. Not anymore, thanks to your little regression. I'm just looking out for an innocent bystander. She doesn't belong in our world, and you're being selfish by pretending she does. You don't know anything about her. Or about me, not anymore. Don't I? She challenged, her eyes sharp. I know you run from anything that gets too real. You bury yourself in work and easy, polished distractions. Like me. We were good at that. What do you think will happen when this gets hard? When her pagers go off during your mother's birthday dinner? When the press digs into her past and splashes it everywhere? You'll retreat, Richard. You always do. And you'll leave her wrecked in your wake. Is that what you want for your childhood sweetheart? Her words struck a nerve because they echoed his own deepest fears. He had used work as a shield. He had avoided emotional entanglements that threatened his controlled existence. Was his pursuit of Audrey just another form of nostalgia, a flight from his present? The confrontation left him shaken, not by her possessiveness, but by the mirror she held up to his own patterns. He drove to Audrey's apartment, a need to see her, to ground himself in the reality of them, overpowering everything else. He found her just returning from her shift, looking weary and beautiful in her scrubs. Audrey, he said, the word full of relief and apology. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a barrier in her warm brown eyes. A professional distance. Richard. Serena came to see you. I know. I'm so sorry. Nothing she said is true. She's trying to sabotage this because she can't stand not winning. Audrey leaned against her door frame, arms crossed. She said you're co-chairing the Winter Gala together. A tradition. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. It's a board obligation she maneuvered herself into years ago. It doesn't mean anything. It means your lives are intertwined. It means there are parts of your world that are inaccessible to me, and maybe should be. She took a deep breath. My world is surgeries at 3 a.m. and grieving parents. It's messy and real, and it doesn't leave room for society galas or managing the feelings of ex-girlfriends. I can't be a charming diversion, Richard. He flinched. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what to think, she said, her voice tired. I'm a surgeon. I deal in facts and things I can fix. Yes, it's all variables and old wounds and social politics I don't understand. I'm starting to wonder if I'm trying to perform a surgery with the wrong tools. The metaphor cut him deeply. He reached for her hand, but she didn't uncross her arms. Audrey, give me a chance to fix this. To show you that my world can include yours. That I want yours. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with a conflict that mirrored his own. I need to think, she said softly. I need to focus on my patients. Their certainty. Right now, that's all I can handle. She closed the door, not with a slam, but with a quiet, definitive click. Richard stood alone in the hallway, the unresolved ghosts of his past whispering in Serena's voice, while the only real, true thing he'd found in years slipped through his fingers. The gilded divide between their lives had never felt wider or more desolate. The silence that followed was a living thing, cold and heavy. Days bled into a week. Audrey's pager was her only reliable companion, its demands a brutal but welcome anchor. She performed 2 successful emergency procedures, consoled a family, and signed off on a promising research grant. Her professional life was a symphony of competence. Her personal life was a single, sustained, discordant note. Richard's texts became less frequent, shifting from pleas to simple, steadfast statements. Thinking of you. I'm handling things. I'm not giving up. She read them, her heart a tangled knot of yearning and dread, but did not reply. Serena's poison seeds had taken root, watered by Audrey's own insecurities and the exhausting reality of her calling. How could she build something with a man when she could barely guarantee her presence at dinner? The Darlington Winter Gala arrived, splashed across society blogs and the city's gossip columns. Audrey, on a rare evening off, made the mistake of clicking a link. There they were, Richard, devastatingly handsome in a classic tuxedo, and Serena, draped in sapphire silk, standing at the head of a grand staircase. The caption read, Power couple reunited? Darlington and Thorne co-chair star-studded affair. It was a perfect gilded picture. The very image Serena had warned her about. Audrey closed her laptop, the glow of the screen replaced by the dim light of her quiet apartment. The conclusion felt inevitable, a diagnosis she had to accept. Some fractures couldn't be mended. Some worlds were too different to collide without catastrophic damage. Hers was one of service, his of spectacle. The boy who shared his fruit snacks was trapped inside the man who belonged on that staircase. Inside the glittering gala, Richard was playing a part in a play he now despised. Every flash of a camera, every murmur of Darlington and Thorne, felt like a betrayal. His eyes kept drifting to the entrance, a foolish hope that she would walk in, that she would see him and understand. She didn't. During his obligatory speech, his gaze scanned the crowd and landed on Serena, smiling up at him with victorious satisfaction. In that moment, clarity struck him with the force of a physical blow. He was not running from something real with Audrey. He had been hiding in something hollow with people like Serena. The confrontation with his past was not a distraction. It was the prerequisite for any real future. He finished the speech to polite applause and immediately descended from the podium, cutting through the crowd with single-minded purpose. He found Serena near the champagne fountain, holding court. We need to talk. Now, he said, his voice low and leaving no room for argument. He led her, her smile faltering, to a secluded balcony. The moment the door closed, the mask fell. This ends tonight, Serena. All of it. Richard, darling, what's gotten into? No, he interrupted, his tone flat and final. You interfered. You insulted the most important person in my life. You tried to manipulate us with lies and nostalgia for a relationship that was always a transaction. Our shared world is a cage and I'm done with it. Her composure cracked, revealing the steel beneath. You'll ruin yourself. You think you're bored, your investors will respect you for chasing some some back alley surgeon? She'll drag you down into her dreary middle-class drama. The slur ignited him. She is a brilliant, compassionate healer. She saves lives while you critique canapes. You are a footnote in my history, Serena. Audrey, she is my future if I'm brave enough to deserve one. And I intend to be. He turned to leave. She won't take you back. Serena spat, her voice trembling with fury. I saw her face. She's too smart to walk into this mess. You've already lost her. Her words were a spear to his heart, because they echoed his deepest fear. He left without another word, the sounds of the gala fading into a meaningless buzz. He didn't retrieve his coat. He walked out into the freezing night, the cold air a shock to his system. He drove directly to Audrey's apartment building, his resolve hardening with each mile. He was done with declarations over text, done with allowing doubt to fester in the space between them. He knocked, the sound urgent in the quiet hallway. When she opened the door, she was in flannel pajamas, her hair in a loose braid, her face bare. She looked heartbreakingly real and more beautiful than anyone at the gala. Her eyes widened in surprise, then shuddered with caution. Richard, you're supposed to be. I left, he said, breath misting in the corridor. I left the gala, I left Serena there, I left all of it. For good. She didn't move, blocking the doorway. That's a dramatic gesture. It doesn't change the facts. Then let me state the facts, he said, his voice raw. I love you, Audrey Brown. I think I've loved you since you shared your cookie with a clumsy, heartbroken boy. I love the surgeon you became and the woman you are. My world is empty without you in it. And I don't want to drag you into my old world. I want to build a new one with you. One that has room for your pagers and my board meetings, for your oar and my foundation. One where the only obligation is to each other. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. It sounds impossible. My life isn't my own. It belongs to my patients. And mine has belonged to a ghost of an empire, he countered, stepping closer, willing her to see his truth. We can give our lives to our callings, Audrey, but we don't have to be alone while we do it. Let me be the person you come home to. Let me be the fortress you don't have to build alone. He laid himself bare before her, no billionaire bravado, just the boy from the playground, terrified and hopeful. Audrey looked at him, seeing the truth of his words in his tired, earnest eyes. She saw the man who had cut the cords to his gilded past. She remembered the protector, the listener, the one whose smile felt like coming home. The wall around her heart, the last fortress she'd built to survive the demands of her life, trembled. It came down to a choice, the safe, solitary path of certain sacrifice, or the terrifying, uncertain leap into a shared future with the one person who had always seen her from the very beginning. She took a shaky breath, the internal battle raging in her gaze. The silence stretched, thin and fragile as ice. The world waited, holding its breath. Christmas Eve dawned brittle and bright. Audrey moved through her silent apartment, the echo of Richard's words and her own unresolved silence a constant companion. She had not called. He had not texted again, honoring her need for space with a quiet dignity that only deepened her ache. Her shift at the hospital had been mercifully light, a lull before the potential storm of holiday accidents. The emptiness of her off hours felt vast. As twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and rose, she found herself driving without conscious decision. Her car navigated the familiar route toward the Oakwood district, toward the old elementary school that now housed the community center where the Children's Hope Foundation ran its holiday program. It was the site of this year's Christmas Eve party for the families they supported. She told herself she was checking in, a professional courtesy. But in her heart, she was pilgrimaging to the place where their story had truly begun, half a lifetime ago. The community gymnasium was a riot of joyful noise, a stark contrast to the sterile quiet of her hospital. Tinsel garlands hung from basketball hoops, a towering tree sparkled in the corner, and the air smelled of pine needles and sugar cookies. Children, some in wheelchairs, others with braces or assisted by walkers, darted and rolled across the floor, their laughter a beautiful, chaotic symphony. Parents chatted in relieved, festive clusters. And then she saw him. Richard was in the thick of it, but not as a photo-op philanthropist. He was on his knees, his expensive wool coat discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up. He was not holding a check or giving a speech. He was helping a small boy with cerebral palsy adjust the grips on a brand new adaptive mountain bike, its frame a cheerful candy apple red. He listened with intense focus as the boy explained the mechanics, his large hands gentle and sure. Nearby, a little girl in a sparkly tutu was showing him a drawing, and he examined it with the solemn appreciation of an art curator. He was wholly present, unself-conscious. Real. Audrey's breath caught. This was not the billionaire from the Gala, nor the wounded boy from her doorstep. This was the man he was at his core, the protector, the builder, the one who showed up. This was the man who built forts and playgrounds. He was doing the work, the quiet, essential work of giving not just money but attention, dignity, and joy. As she watched, the foundation director, a warm-eyed woman named Maria, approached Richard with a clipboard. Audrey edged closer, unseen behind a group of carolers. Mr. Darlington, the final delivery from your foundation just arrived. The sensory play sets for the nonverbal wing. The therapists are in tears, they're so perfect. Richard smiled, a genuine, effortless thing. It was Dr. Brown's notes that got the specifications right. She reviewed the designs. Make sure her consultation is listed on the grant paperwork, will you? Her name should be on this. He hadn't just listened to her that day in the park. He had acted on her expertise, weaving her work into his own, honoring her in the most tangible way. The final piece of her fortress crumbled, not with a dramatic crash, but with a soft, yielding sigh. Serena's whispers of diversion and different worlds evaporated in the face of this unvarnished sincerity. He wasn't asking her to enter his world. He was meticulously, respectfully building a bridge between theirs, brick by brick. She must have made a sound, or perhaps he simply felt her gaze. He looked up, across the crowded, joyful room, and his eyes found hers. Everything around them blurred, the noise, the lights, the children, until there was only the quiet understanding flowing across the space between them. He said something to Maria, then began moving toward her, his path slow but unwavering. He stopped a foot away, his expression open, vulnerable, hopeful. "You're here," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. "I am. I was going to come find you tomorrow. I promised you space." "You built a bridge instead," she whispered, her eyes glistening as she gestured to the room, to the bike, to the invisible thread of his actions connecting them. He reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to retreat, and took her hand. His fingers were warm, solid. "I love you, Audrey. I'm in. All of it. The pagers, the late nights, the emergencies. I want the real, messy, magnificent life you live. And I want to share mine with you, the parts that are good and the parts I'm still working on." Tears finally spilled over, tracing warm paths down her cheeks. She saw it all now, not the obstacles but the path. A path they could walk together, her healing hands and his builder's heart, their shared history a foundation stronger than any doubt. "I was so scared," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Scared I wasn't enough, that my life was too much." "You are everything," he said, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "And your life, it's the life I want. If you'll have me in it." She didn't answer with words. She stepped into him, closing the last inch of distance, and rose on her toes. Her lips met his in a kiss that was both a homecoming and a beginning. It held the sweetness of shared snickerdoodles, the strength of survived hardships, and the brilliant, boundless promise of a future chosen together. Around them, the children's party swelled, a chorus of innocent joy bearing witness to a different kind of healing. When they finally parted, foreheads resting together, the world came back into focus, brighter, clearer, brimming with possibility. "Merry Christmas, Richard," she breathed. "It's the first one," he replied, his smile brighter than any tree. "The first of all of them." Hand in hand they turned back to the room. Not to escape their worlds but to join them. He helped the child with a new game. She knelt to check the fit of a little girl's new ankle brace, offering soft, professional reassurance. They moved in easy orbit around each other, two distinct stars whose gravity now pulled them into a shared constellation. Later, as the last of the families departed, leaving the gymnasium quiet and strewn with the confetti of celebration, Richard wrapped his coat around Audrey's shoulders. They stood under the mistletoe hanging from the basketball hoop. "So," he said, "what's the prognosis, doctor?" Audrey looked up at him, her heart full, her path clear. She smiled, the genuine, unguarded smile of the girl from the playground, now reflected in the eyes of the man she loved. "The prognosis is excellent," she said. full recovery, and a lifetime of preventative care, together. Outside, the first snow of Christmas began to fall, blanketing the city in a soft, silent promise of new beginnings. Inside, surrounded by the ghosts of childhood past and the tangible hope of a shared future, Richard and Audrey stepped into their second chance, knowing that the greatest gift they would ever receive had been there all along, waiting to be unwrapped. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe and join us for more stories that prove compassion can change the world.